Okay. So in our previous session, we talked about what is variable, what are different types in which we can declare a variable, and what is difference between var, let, and const keyword. So we have seen difference between var, let, and const, where we have discussed what is the scope. What is the scope of var, let, and const? So scope of var is global or functional. Whenever you declare inside function, the scope will be functional. If you define it inside outside of the function, then it will be a global. Let will have a scope as block label, and then const is also having a scope as block label. Both of the variables in terms of var, whenever we declare a var, declare a variable using var keywords, it can be redeclared and can be reinitialized, which we have seen, where we can declare the same variable multiple times by using var keywords. In terms of let, it does not allow, but it allows the reinitialization. That means you can change the number at any point of time. And also we have discussed regarding whenever we declare a variable using var keyword, it is not mandatory to assign the value at the time of declaration. That means you can assign or you can store the value after declaring the variable as well. That is allowed in terms of var and let, whereas const says that it is mandatory to assign the value to a variable at the time of declaration. That means we have to declare and assign the value to a variable at the time of declaration of const, which is constant variable, by using a keyword which is const. Okay. So this will be very important in terms of interview purpose. They'll ask you what is difference between var, let, and const. Nowadays, as we have talked about, var we mostly do not use in modern JavaScript or TypeScript. We do not use var keywords to declare a variable. Most of the time, we use let or const. Again, there are an option that whenever we know that the value of the variable can be changed in the complete program or script, at that point of time, we can use a let keyword to declare a variable. But if we know that the value will always be constant, which will be similar at all the point of time, at that point of time, we can use const as a keyword to declare a variable. This is similar in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Okay, let's move to the a new topic, which is data types in TypeScript. Data types.ts. Also, yesterday I talked about one of the thing where um, I've given a simple assignment to check whether this one that we had seen earlier, that var is having an issue where it overrides the global values of a variable. That I'd given an assignment to check with const. Were you able to check that? If not, then whenever you get time, try to do that so that you'll understand what is happening in, like, what is major difference between var, let, and const. Okay, let's move to the data types. Uh, so data types again over here, and in terms of, so what is in general a data type is? Anyone can answer what is data type if you have worked previously or if you have used previously. So data type is just defining that what kind of data that we are trying to store, right? So data type is something which defines what kind of data a variable is storing. Variable is storing. What is mean by that? It is simple that whenever we have a data type, right? That means whenever we declare a variable, let's say example, we say it as number or num equals to 10. So this represents like what kind of data this number variable, which is num variable, is having, like, or is have stored the value. So this is a variable that we have declared using let keyword. The variable name is num and the value that we have assigned is 10. So this 10 represents what kind of data type or what kind of data that we have stored inside a variable, which is num. We know that this is a integer value. Why? Because we have declared it as a number value over here. So this represents a data type. What kind of data type we are trying to use? This represents a data type, that the data that we have stored, what is the type of that data types? Okay, so there are different data types that we have in any programming language. Any of the programming language you use, whatever is available in the market, available as a technology part. So every programming language will have some kind of data types, including JavaScript and TypeScript. They have some different data types that we'll discuss over here in our session today. So in simple term, data type is it basically represents a data is having what kind of or what type. It can be a numeric, it can be a string, it can be a boolean, it can be other things that we'll be discussing in our session today. Okay, so in general, there are two types of data type. So this value that we have given over here, it can be integer, it can also be some kind of value, let's say string, it can be a false or true, which represents returns. It can be also a null value and so on. So it just represents what kind of types or what kind of like types of the data that we have stored inside a variable. Okay. Now let's see in detail like what is data type, what are different data types that we have. So there are two types of data type that we have in any of the programming language. There are two types of data type. One is primitive data type, and second is object data type. Which is also known as a non-primitive. So let's say it as non-primitive data type. Non-primitive. Here in our today's session, we'll discuss about the primitive data type. As soon as we progress in our session, we'll discuss the non-primitive data type as well. So what is primitive data type? Primitive data type are like there are different data types in different programming language. If you have worked on Java, you might be knowing that there are integer, floating point number, double, string, boolean, and some other data type that we have in terms of primitive. In the same way, both in terms of JavaScript and TypeScript, we have the same data type with a slight difference in TypeScript. So the primitive data type that we have in terms of TypeScript, there are 5 data types that is having. There are like 5 different data types are most popular in terms of TypeScript. There are few more which we'll discuss, but mostly never we used. So we'll starting with first primitive data type is first is number, second string, third is boolean that we have. I'll talk about everything in details, which is like so first we'll try to identify what are the different data types that we have. I have also given in terms of our documentation. I'm just trying to modify few of the things which have been changed in the recent version, which they have added. That is why I have not shared this document, but probably by end of the day today, I'll share it with you people as well. So you can go through with that. I've added everything in terms of this documentation as well. So if you see over here, we have added every uh, data types in detail. That is what we are trying to discuss right now. Okay. So we have different data types. One is number, other is string, third one is Boolean, fourth we have as a null, fifth is undefined, and sixth in terms of TypeScript we have any. These five are common between JavaScript and TypeScript. Any is one that it has added in in TypeScript. What is meant by any? We'll discuss. So whenever you use any, that almost become a JavaScript. That means a TypeScript at that point of time becomes a JavaScript. Okay, so let's start with number first. And if I talk about in terms of non-primitive data type, we have again different. One is like array. Second we have is object. Third is functions. These are the three things that we'll be discussing in terms of non-primitive data type. We'll discuss in our later sessions. We have scheduled that like functions, arrays, string, objects in our later part of sessions. Okay, so let's see the complete details of the primitive data type that we have in terms of TypeScript, starting with a number. First is number. So whenever we declare number is in terms of TypeScript, number is something which is also an integer, also a floating point value, also a double kind of things that we declare as a double in terms of JavaScript. So in general, the data types that we have in terms of TypeScript and JavaScript, which represents a number that also have a decimal point value as well as a integer value. So in terms of JavaScript or TypeScript does not discriminate based on the integer or floating point number. So it says that basically the number type in terms of TypeScript represents both integer and floating point value. It represents both integer and floating point value. What is floating point? Is something which is having a decimal point. Example, let's say 100.56 is a floating point number. What is integer? Is a complete whole value, which is 1, 2, 3, something like 45 and so on. These are known as integer value and these are floating point value. Whenever we have to declare integer value, which is like a number, which is in terms of like, let's say example 1, 2, 3, in terms of Java, how do we declare this? By using int a equals to, let's say 100. And if you have to declare a floating point value, which is in terms of decimal, then we'll be going with either float or double, and then we can say like b equals to 34.56 example. This is how we represent in terms of Java. Whereas JavaScript and TypeScript is entirely different. Both of JavaScript and TypeScript says that we do not discriminate any kind of number, whether it be an integer or floating point or decimal point value. We'll consider it as a number itself. So how do we declare a number variable in terms of TypeScript is? First things we have discussed yesterday that how do we declare a variable. So the syntax of variable that I had seen earlier is the data. This used to be, let me remove it from here. This used to be in terms of Java. Whereas in terms of JavaScript, we have a keyword, variable name, and then equals to value. So keyword, it can be either var, let, const, where we do not use. So we'll be using either let or const, variable name, and then value. So if you see over here, let's say variable name, I'm providing it as a, and then we can directly enter a value, which is 30. I think a we have already declared. Cannot redeclare a block value. Why did we declare? Choose. No. Okay. So if you see over here, what did we do is we have just declared a variable which is keywords, variable name, and then value. So if you see this one, this is exactly similar in terms of JavaScript as well. We define similarly in JavaScript as well. There is no difference at all. But there is only difference that in terms of TypeScript is we provide the data type over here. Okay, we provide the data type over here. So now if you see the declaration of variable in terms of TypeScript becomes keyword, which is var let const. We do not use var, but there is no restriction that we cannot use var in terms of using the or defining the variable. Then variable name equals to variable name, and then the data type of the variable equals to. Okay, so first as is a keyword which is let, we have defined it over here, then variable name which is num, and then it says that a data type that we have to define. As it is saying a data type that we have to define, that is why TypeScript is a statically typed language. That means before at the time of compilation, it will check what kind of data type that we are storing over here. Okay, so it will just say that what kind of data type that we are trying to store over here. It will also try to check what kind of data type that we are trying to store. In terms of JavaScript, this is not mandatory. Here in terms of TypeScript as well, it is not mandatory, but it is always a better to provide the data type as well, because TypeScript is a type-safe language. Which type-safe language means it will validate what kind of data that you are trying to store over here. Okay, I'll show you like what is the difference, and then you will probably understand the difference between like here the JavaScript and TypeScript, and why do we provide the data type over here. Now, if you see this one and you hover over on this num that we have given, you can see that it is accepting a number data type. Okay, so this data type that we have provided is not mandatory. TypeScript will automatically able to also define like what kind of data type that we have declared. Let me remove this one and save the file. Now you hover over on this num element, and then still you see that it is accepting as a number, because TypeScript will automatically identify what kind of, based on the data that we have stored, it will identify what kind of data type this variable is having. Let's change it to example string value. And now if you see over here, it automatically changes the data type, which is string. So it automatically identifies based on the data that we define, based on the data that we provide. But it's always better, TypeScript always suggests that to use a data types along with the variable name, so that it will be a statically typed language, and it also checks your uh, like type of the data type that we have used, so that if there will be any kind of mistakes or error in your code, it will automatically identify. Okay, so this is a simple things that we declare in terms of number. If you want to declare, let's say, new floating point value, at that point of time also we have to just say it as number, and then 34.23 example. Okay, here also, if you hover over, it just says that it is a number data type. Now we can also try to print by just using console.log. Num is the first variable that we have declared, and num1 is the second variable. So whenever we have to print a multiple data at the same line, we have to, in general, in terms of Java, we concatenate. In terms of JavaScript and TypeScript, we provide a comma separated value to print out, print or display on the console whatever the value that we want to print. Let's try to check once and then we'll see how it is happening. So first, I'll convert this into a JavaScript file here to just show you the difference that it is having between JavaScript and TypeScript. So I'll just convert first, like compile the file into JavaScript. So it will compile our file into a .js extension, and then we can run it with node datatypes.js. This is one way where we run our code, which you can see here, which is 30 and 34.23. Let's go back to the datatypes.js that it has created. And if you see over here, everything is same except it has removed the number from here. Everything is same in terms of JavaScript and TypeScript. Right. So if you see over here, this is in TypeScript, this is in JavaScript. If you see, both are same. This had just converted into without like a colon number. Here also we do not see any colon and number. Whereas here in terms of TypeScript, we provide a number. Now why are we trying to provide this? Let me just change it to 2 and 3 because it is throwing us an error. Now you see over here, we have declared a variable which is numeric. That means a number data type. Now if you want to declare some other value in terms of JavaScript, we are in JavaScript over here. You can see the file extension .js, and this is TypeScript extension with a .ts extension. Now if you want to store a value, let's say I'll just say it as JavaScript over here. Okay, and now you try to print for this particular one. You'll see that you try to run this one now. This is now if you try to print, here it is saying JS and 34.23. That means it violates the concept of data type over here. First, we have defined integer, and after that, we were able to change it to a string. Let's say if we have to use the same same variable that we have declared as a num2 in the later part of our scripting, we'll still be thinking that this is having a value as 30. Whereas in somewhere in between the script, it have been changed to a string value, and this will fail. This will probably fail our test cases or any kind of coding that we are writing, considering the value that we have declared as an original. Whereas in terms of TypeScript, if you just try to change it to, let's say, num equals to ts, it throws us an error there itself. This is also a proof that TypeScript is a statically typed language. That means it checks what kind of data type first we have to validate. First, we have to at the time of declaration, what kind of data type it is storing, and after that, it also checks later on whenever we try to store any kind of value which is like different than the original data type. At that point of time, it will throw us an error saying that type string is not assignable to type number. This is what the benefit we have in terms of TypeScript over JavaScript. Apart from that, everything is similar. Okay. Even if you remove it over here, right? Let's say you have removed the number from here as a data type. Still, it is considering the value based on the data that we have stored, based on the original data that we have stored, and later point of time, it will throw us an error by checking the type of the data type that we have used on our variable. Okay, this whenever you do not give any value, and if the TypeScript is automatically able to identify the value by guessing based on the data that we have provided. Let's say if you write it in string format, then it will not throw us an error because both of the data type are same. Here also and here also are same. Whereas if you just change it to one different value at that point of time, it will just say it as we are supposed to enter a number data type, but we have entered a string variable. That is what we have the major difference between TypeScript and JavaScript. Now here you can see we did not define in terms of like this, what kind of data type we have to store. By guessing based on the data that we have stored on a variable, TypeScript is able to identify the data type that we have used. This process is known as type inference. This process in TypeScript is known as type inference, where TypeScript is guessing the data type of the variable that we have stored for any variable. Okay. When we have not provided the data type. Here in terms of this, if you see in terms of num1, we have provided a data type, which is we have to write it as colon and then data type. Whenever we provide by specifically mentioning that what kind of data type we are trying to store, this process is known as type annotation. That means we are specifically mentioning that what kind of data type we are trying to store over here. In terms of type inference, TypeScript guess the data type of the value based on the data that we are trying to store is known as type inference. Okay. So we have understood what is difference between type inference and type annotation. In terms of type annotation, we specifically mention the data type that we are trying to store. In terms of type inference, TypeScript automatically guess based on the value that you store it over here. So if you hover over on num, it is saying a number data type, but if you just change it to a string, then it will change it to string. Let's say if you just make it to a Boolean data type, which is Boolean accept either a true or false. At that point of time, if you hover on, it just say it as Boolean. If you just change it to null, it will convert it into null. If you, let's say, define it as undefined, it will just say it as undefined data types. Okay. So here it is guessing what kind of data that we have stored, and that process is known as type inference. Okay, let's move on for the next data type. So this is a simple one where we store a value for a variable. It can be either integer value or floating point value or decimal point value. In terms of TypeScript and JavaScript, both are considered as same itself. Let me delete the data type.js file over here. Now this was one. Second is string data type. Second is string data type. What is string? String is a text value or a combination of characters. Okay, so string type is used to represent a textual data type. That means whatever the text value or word that we define, that we declare is known as a string. It is also a combination of characters. The combination of characters is known as a string. In TypeScript, there are three ways in which we declare a string value. There are three ways in which we declare a string value in TypeScript as well as in JavaScript. One is inside a single quote. I think Amit was trying to ask question earlier whenever we used console.log. So whenever you try to print any value in terms of string, either you can use a single quote or you can use a double quote inside the double quote. And there are third way where we use by just marking it inside a backtick. Backtick is also one of a symbol. Inside backtick also we'll be able to write the string. This is known as string template. These two, whenever we try to declare a string by using single quote or double quote, this is known as string literal, where where we declare directly the value for a variable. This is also known as string. So there are three ways in which we can declare a string in TypeScript. One is using a single quote, second is using a double quote, and third is using a backtick. Where will you find a backtick? Backtick you will find on your keyboard just above to the tab button or just beside to number 1. Okay. So let's declare it. Declare few of the string value that will be declared over here. So let's say we'll say it as first name. Let first name equals to let's say TypeScript. Okay. So we have just defined a first name over here as a TypeScript. We have not given any data type over here. It automatically considered a value as a string value. And in this process, we have understood what is this process known as a type inference, where it automatically guesses the type of the data type. But in general, whenever we try to use TypeScript, it is always better to provide the data type that we are trying to use. So we can define it in this way, which is let first name colon data type, which is string, and then the value. This is in single quote. Let's change it the name as single quote. We can define the value in terms of double quotation as well. So you can just say it as double quote and enter the value just inside the double quote. Let's say I'll just say it as TypeScript TS. So these are the two ways in which we can define a string literal by directly assigning a string value to a variable, which is inside a single quote or inside a double quote. In terms of JavaScript and TypeScript, string value we can define either inside a single quote or inside a double quote. Whereas in terms of Java, we use single quote to define a character. We do not have anything known as character in terms of TypeScript. Okay, so character is a single value that we define. But in terms of JavaScript and TypeScript, though you define it as a single value, let's say single value equals to inside, let's say A, this will also be considered as a string in terms of JavaScript and TypeScript. So there is no concept of character data type in both JavaScript and TypeScript. Okay, so there are three ways we discussed. One is single quote, one is double quote. So either you define a word or a text or a combination of character inside a single quote, that is also known as string. Or if you define it inside a double quote, that is also known as a string in terms of TypeScript. Now there are third way, which we say it as by using backtick, which is also known as string template. This type of string will mostly be used when we basically try to use a string variable inside another string value. What is meant by that? So let's try to see it over here. I'll just say it as let first name equals to some value, let's say John. And we'll try to say it as, let's say, greet. We'll just try to declare a variable, which is again a greet, and we'll just say it as hello. And we want to use a name, which we have defined it over here, which is John. So one thing is, if you know the name, we can directly define. Let's say if it is coming from a file or different first name can appear. At that point of time, it will always display a name, a complete value as hello John every time, even though if you change it to, let's say, JS, this value will always define us a variable that we are trying to use inside a greet console.log, and then we'll say greet. So what happened over here is, though we have a first name that we have declared JS, but whatever we have entered inside this greet as a data type or a greet as a variable will just display the similar value. So how do we run it as tsx data types dot ts. So now if you see over here, it is displaying a hello John. But what is our main goal is to use first name. Whatever the first name that you define, based on that, it has to declare the value. So even if you use over here, which is the first name inside the double quote, we know that the first name that we have declared is a string value over here. We have declared a first name, which is string value over here. And if you use the same variable name inside the another string inside the double quote, let's see what is happening. It just say it as hello first name. But whatever the first name value that we have given, it is not considering. Let's try to see in terms of single quote what is happening. In terms of single quote as well, it is displaying us the value which is hello first name. But we want to use the name that we have declared over here. At that point of time, we have to use backtick symbol. And then to use the another that whenever we say like when we try to use a string variable inside another string variable, at that point of time, we have to use it like starting with a dollar symbol and then inside the curly braces. Okay, so we have to use a dollar symbol over here. And then we have to write the variable that we are trying to use inside another string inside a curly braces. Okay, now you might be having a question. Okay, what if we use inside a double quote in the same way by defining it as dollar and inside a curly braces? Let's see what happens. So whenever we use it in terms of double quote, it just consider all the value as a string value itself. And now if we try to run the code, it just print us hello dollar first name. Even in terms of single quote, if you try to see over here, we'll just declare the similar value, which is hello first name over here. But now, whenever by the definition, it says that when we try to use a string variable inside another variable, we have to first use a dollar curly brace, and whatever the variable that we have to use, it will go inside a curly brace. Now, if you see over here, it represents the value that we have used. Whatever the value that we have used over here, it will display the value as hello JS. You see over here, it is returning us a value hello. The first name it is getting from the declaration that we have declared. Now, let's say if you just change it to John, this will just change the value from JS to John. We can say it as it is displaying a value as hello John. Okay. So these are the way in which we declare a string in terms of TypeScript. Now the third is known as a Boolean. It represents always a two value. So Boolean will always have two different values. The Boolean type represents two values, which is either true or false. This is mostly, this will mostly help us in terms of validating a condition. Sometimes whenever we have to validate whether the two numbers are same, whether the two string are same, or some kind of validation, some kind of decision that we have to make based on some condition, at that point of time, this Boolean variable will be helpful. So Boolean type represents two values, either true or false. Most of the time we'll be using inside a condition or logical operations kind of things. We'll see like where we can use, like example, whenever we use if statement, like if statement, this basically takes a condition. So this condition will validate either true or false. If it is true, then inside if statement, whatever the value will be writing will be executed. If it is false, then nothing will be printed, or it will directly go to the else part. We'll discuss that in our next session regarding the if statement. So Boolean represents a two value. We can directly say that, let's say, some variable we can define it as, which is, let's say, its admin equals to. That means we are saying that there is a variable known as isAdmin, and that is having a type of value which is true. Now here in terms of this, you have seen first name, you can define it as string. or else like it will also be, that means TypeScript will also be able to provide automatically whatever the data type that we are using. In case of this also, we can provide it as a Boolean data type. Okay, so this is let isAdmin and then let's say some value where is number, which is false. So Boolean data type will always take a true value, which is either true or false. Now the fourth one is known as null. Null is also a data type in terms of TypeScript as well as in terms of JavaScript. Whenever we do not define any value to a variable and mark it as null, it represents a null data type. So these data types represents basically the absence of value. That means there is no value assigned to a variable. Example, let name string equals to null. That means here we have to define it as null. Name we have defined in somewhere inside this. So let's let name to colon null equals to null. That means we are saying that we are trying to store a data type which is of a null type. What is null? Null is a value which a variable which is not having any kind of value. A variable which is having just a null value is known as a null data type. We most of the time will not be using this, but sometimes let's say whenever we try to create an object for a class and let's say if we want to check whether the object have already been created or not. At that point of time, we'll check whether the object of a class is equals to null. If it is null, then create an object. This is only one, like there are a couple of ways as well, but most of the time we'll not be using a null data type. And the next one, which is defined data type. So null says that it basically indicates that we have no value for a variable. This just considered as a no value for a variable. It is simply a null. Okay. So whenever you define a variable with a value as null, it's just considered as no value for a variable, and that is considered as a null data type in terms of TypeScript. Now, next one is also known as undefined. There is a slight difference between null and undefined. Undefined is again, that means the variable is having no value. The definition is same for both of the variable is having a no value in terms of null as well as in terms of undefined. These two will mostly not be using in terms of TypeScript in terms of our test automation. Most of the time we'll be going for number, string, and Boolean. But let's try to understand what is difference between null and undefined. Both is having a value as no value. And in terms of undefined as well, the value is no value. That means it is undefined. But there is a slight difference that whenever we declare a variable, let's say name 4, we have just declared a variable, but we have not assigned a value. We have just declared a variable, we have not assigned a value. And if you try to print this one, which is name 4, will return us undefined. What is meant by that? That means we have declared a variable, but we have not assigned any value yet. We have declared a variable, which is name 4, but for this name 4, we have not assigned a value. So whenever we declare a variable, but we do not assign a value, by default, it will display as an undefined, which will take a data type as undefined for the variable that we declared, but we have not assigned any value. Let's try to print it and see what is happening over here in terms of name 4. If you see over here, it is returning as undefined. That means we have defined a variable, but we have not assigned any value. That is what known as undefined. Whereas in terms of null, we specifically mention that we have defined a variable and we have also assigned a value as null to that particular variable. In terms of undefined, is a default data type for all the type of variable that we declare in TypeScript. Is a default data type for all the type of variable that we declare in terms of TypeScript. If we do not assign the value to a variable, at that point of time, it will just consider it as a undefined data type. Okay. Now we'll also finish it off quickly for the next one, which is any data type. Now, what is meant by any? Whenever we use any data type, it says that it can hold any type of data type inside a variable. This is similar to that we have seen in terms of JavaScript, where what did we do is we defined a variable, let's say variable equals to 30, and then we change the variable to ts, right? So it was allowed in terms of JavaScript because JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. Because JavaScript is a dynamically typed language and it can hold any type of data type, any type of value of a data type at any point of time. And also it checks the types of the data type at the runtime. That is why known as that is why the data JavaScript is known as a dynamically typed language, whereas TypeScript is known as a statically typed language. If you see over here, it basically it generally says that we have defined as type string is not assignable to the type number, because originally we have declared a variable one as number, which even though we have not given, using the type inference process, it is able to identify what kind of data type we have declared over here. Okay, but this case is allowed in terms of JavaScript. Now, whenever we use a data type, which is any, now you can see that the error from here have been disappeared. Let's remove it and then see. Now in this case, it is throwing us an error saying that type string is not assignable to a type number. But if you assign this as any data type, that means it says that it can hold any type of data type. Now, if you provide it any, it becomes similar to JavaScript, which we have declared the variable as in variable with a data type as any. So any type of data type we can store for this particular variable. Let's say if you want to store a Boolean now, it will not throw us any kind of error because we are saying that you can accept any type of data type that we have in terms of TypeScript. Okay, so whenever we use any data type, it simply says that you can accept any type of variable, any type of value to a variable. Either it can be a numeric, string, null data type, undefined data types, any kind of data type we can use. This is also a special data type that Playwright TypeScript is having. Okay, so the any type can represent any value, making it do not check any type safety. That means in terms of any data type, it will not check what kind of data type we are trying to use. It will just accept the value, whatever we define for this particular variable. Okay, any question till now in terms of data type?
Sir, actually, so in the like in undefined and any, and how we are representing the data, right? So we are not specifying any, if we are not specifying anything in the while declaring the variable also. It is like
Mhm.
any, right?
No, it depends on the data that we store.
But
So if you,
because we are specifically specifying the any right there.
in terms of any,
If we are
in
not
term,
specifying anything, it is still handling that part, right?
correct, so correct. So whenever you define any, it will accept any type of data type. But whenever you define nothing, let's say, which is variable 2, and then you have just given as a 30 value, or let's say 35, right? Here, based on the data, the TypeScript will be able to identify the data type of this variable. Okay, here if you hover over on this number, this variable, it is saying a data type as number. Whereas if you hover over on this, it says the data type as any. Okay, and now if you try to do the similar things that we have done over here in terms of this one, which is variable 2, then it will throw us an error saying that originally we have declared a variable which is of type number, but we are trying to store the value, or we are trying to assign a value which is a type of string. It is originally declared as a number, but we are trying to store a value. That is where it will throw us an error. So if you do not define anything based on the data that we are trying to store, it will define the data. It will identify the data type. For example, I have just given a true. It has identified it as a boolean. So this case where we do not define, and this case where we define any, both are different.
Okay, got it.
Okay, great. Any question? Any other questions from anyone? Okay. So this
Praveen,
is what?
one
Yes.
question.
Yes.
This is similar as typecasting in Java.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay.
This is similar, and we always use type of the data type at the time of declaration in terms of Java. In terms of Java, whenever we declare, we'll say it as int number equals to 34, float num1 equals to, let's say, 50.9. We declare it as a bool. Let's say if you want to declare a boolean value, we say it as a equals to true, and so on. That means we are trying to provide the data type automatically. That is also, JavaScript is also a statically typed language. Whenever you use a statically typed language, at the time of writing itself, it will throw us an error if there are any kind of error. Whenever we are trying to use a dynamically typed language will never throw us an error at the time of writing the code. At the time of execution, it will throw us an error saying that we have done uh, some kind of error. We still have a couple of more minutes, so I'll show you the difference over here.
Uh,
Let me.
also one
Mhm.
more thing, like, is it like how should we means what is exactly the real world will do this while declaring the things? So in the real
Right, right. So in real time, whenever we try to work with TypeScript, we define the exact data type. We have to provide the exact data type in terms of TypeScript. Else, it will become exactly similar to JavaScript.
okay,
Though
so
if we use,
we should follow the same thing, right? While writing the
we
thing.
we should follow the rules and regulation that TypeScript has given. Okay, though it will be able to identify based on the data, but it is always better to provide the type that we are trying to use. So if anyone else will see your code, they'll directly identify what kind of data type we are trying to store.
Might be that will also increase the optimization of the code, right? Because it's already
Mm.
specified, right? Or it will
It is
not
right.
hamper in.
It is also in terms of readability as well as catching the error at the time of compilation itself. That means at the time of writing the code itself. Let's say if you use any, you will be able to use any of the variable. In terms of in JavaScript, we have seen that whenever we define any variable with, let's say, 30, after that also we were able to define some other variable. But in terms of TypeScript, it restricts us to use a single data type for a single variable, apart from any data type. Okay. So what is meant by that is, if you use Boolean, then for this particular variable, you cannot assign anything other than Boolean. So in terms of real time writing the test, every time whenever we use TypeScript, we have to follow the rules that TypeScript has given to define a variable. But anyways, let's say if you forgot to define the data type at that point of time, TypeScript is smart enough to identify based on the data that we are trying to declare. Because if you remove this string from here, it automatically identify the string data type. And also it will not allow you to enter any value. Though you have not defined anything, it will not allow you to enter any other data type than you have originally declared a data type. Okay, whereas in terms of JavaScript, it is allowed because JavaScript is a dynamically typed language and it do not check the type safe at the time of writing the code.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so these are
Sorry,
yes,
one more question. So
yes,
in real time, where we use this undefined and any, like I am assuming like when we are doing a
right.
kind of trial and error, so initially we'll be using undefined or any apart
Right.
from.
So undefined and null most of the time will not be using. Undefined will automatically be considered whenever we declare a variable without assigning any value, that will be considered as an undefined. So every time whenever we try to get some kind of value, let's say in terms of test automation, what happens is like we declare a variable and that variable probably we can use in few of the methods or few of the test cases. So at that point of time, we declare just a variable without assigning any value. That will be considered as an undefined. Whereas whenever we try to declare any variable and the value or the data, whenever it is coming from any file or any APIs, let's say we are trying to get the data from API or any of the file, we do not know what kind of data type it will be having. So if you do not know what kind of data type the variable is going to store, at that point of time, we can use any as a data type. So whatever the data type it will be, it will automatically accept the value.
Okay.
If we do
Yeah.
not know the type of the variable that we have to store at that point of time, we can use any as a data type. For undefined, whenever you do not assign any value to a variable, that will automatically be considered as an undefined. For null, we have to specifically mention that the variable is assigned to a value which is null. That means no value it has been given.
Yeah, we if we get some example like while we after some time we are doing right playwright and that time if
Right,
we
right,
specify unified or a null that will be more clearer for us. So that
right.
if we can try to use this one, then might be it is helpful for us.
Correct, correct. So we'll see that all these examples in our real time as well. Let me see if I have any examples over here. Anyways, we'll see that in our session as well whenever we go through with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. We will cover up that part there.
Right, right. So this is about the data types that we have in terms of TypeScript. Okay. So with this, I'll stop it over here. If you see, you might be wondering that, okay, statement is also a part of this, but this is somehow have been appeared over here as a statement because we have a statement for the day 4 part. We have a statement and loops for the day 4 and day 5 parts. So there we'll consider statement. In terms of tomorrow's session, we'll be going ahead with understanding like different types of operators that we have. Operator are again similar in all the programming languages, not only in JavaScript or TypeScript, but it is similar in all the programming languages that we use. Okay, so with this, I'll stop our session over here. And in terms of the next session, we'll start with understanding the operators that we have in terms of TypeScript.